Something is about to leave your life. Something else is about to arrive. And somewhere between July 23rd and July 30th, you will feel it before you understand it. A name will cross your mind for no reason. A silence will suddenly feel louder than words. You won't know why yet, but you will know something has shifted. Maybe you've already felt it. That strange tightness in your chest when a certain someone doesn't text back the way they used to. That flicker of relief when another person simply shows up, without being asked, at exactly the right moment. That quiet, uneasy sense that not everyone standing beside you right now is meant to walk with you into whatever comes next. You are not imagining it. You are not being paranoid or dramatic or ungrateful for the people in your life. You are noticing something real. Something most people are too busy, too distracted, or too afraid to look at directly. Because looking directly at who truly belongs in your life also means admitting who might not. This is not a story about horoscopes or magic or guaranteed fate. This is a story about attention, about what happens when you finally start paying attention to the small, quiet signals your life has been sending you for weeks, maybe months, maybe years. Because the truth is, the people who are meant to stay rarely announce themselves loudly, and the people who are meant to leave rarely leave all at once. Both truths tend to arrive the same way, quietly, one small moment at a time, until one week comes along and makes all of those small moments impossible to ignore. This next week may be that week for you. Think about the last few days. Not in a vague, general way. Think specifically. Was there a conversation that left you feeling strangely hollow afterward, even though nothing was technically wrong? Was there a person who crossed your mind at an unusual hour, someone you hadn't thought about in a while, and you couldn't explain why? Did you find yourself relieved when certain plans got cancelled, and secretly disappointed when others did? These are not coincidences. These are data points. And your mind has been collecting them long before your heart was ready to admit what they mean. There is a reason this particular stretch of days feels different. Astrologers, psychologists, and even neuroscientists who study intuition all describe something similar happening during certain transitional periods. A kind of heightened emotional sensitivity, where the nervous system becomes more attuned to subtle social cues it normally filters out. Call it what you want. A shift in energy, a psychological threshold, a seasonal emotional cycle. Whatever language you use for it, the effect tends to be the same. Things that were easy to ignore suddenly become impossible to ignore. And that's exactly what's coming. Because between now and next week, you are likely to encounter at least one moment, maybe several, where the truth about a relationship in your life becomes undeniable. Not through some dramatic confrontation, not through a fight or a breakup or a scene, through something smaller. A pause before someone answers a simple question, a tone of voice that doesn't match the words being said, a promise that quietly goes unfulfilled for the third time. These moments are easy to dismiss individually, but add them together and a pattern starts to emerge. And patterns, unlike single moments, are very hard to unsee once you've seen them. Here is the uncomfortable part. Most people spend years avoiding this kind of clarity, because clarity comes with responsibility. Once you know something, you can't fully unknow it. Once you notice that a friendship has become one-sided, or that a relationship has quietly stopped growing, or that someone in your life only shows up when they need something, you are faced with a choice. Do you keep pretending you didn't notice? Or do you let the truth reshape the way you move forward? This week may force that choice into the open. But before you brace yourself for loss, understand something important. Not every ending is a tragedy, and not every sign is a warning. Some of what you're about to notice will point toward people who deserve more space in your life, not less. A friend who has quietly, consistently shown up, checking on you without being asked, remembering details you didn't think anyone noticed, staying steady when everyone else got complicated. You may have been so focused on the relationships causing you pain that you overlooked the ones quietly giving you peace. This week has a way of correcting that imbalance too. There's a particular kind of ache that comes from loving people who are inconsistent. The kind of ache where you convince yourself the good moments outweigh the confusing ones, where you keep giving second chances because the first version of that person, the version you fell for, still feels retrievable somewhere underneath the distance. If that sounds familiar, you already know the tension building inside you. Part of you is loyal, part of you is exhausted, and somewhere very quietly, part of you already knows the answer. You just haven't been ready to admit it out loud. That's what makes the coming days so significant. Not because something magical is going to happen, but because you are approaching a threshold of honesty with yourself that you've been circling for a long time. Let's talk about what that threshold might actually look like. It often starts small, smaller than people expect. A text message that takes 6 hours longer to answer than it used to. A plan that gets maybe instead of a clear yes. An inside joke that doesn't land the same way it once did. On their own, none of these things mean anything. People get busy, life gets complicated. But when you start noticing several of these small shifts happening close together, in the same relationship, during the same short window of time, that's not randomness anymore. That's rhythm. And rhythm is one of the most honest languages relationships speak, whether we're listening or not. Psychologists who study relationship dynamics often point to something called emotional bandwidth. Essentially, how much energy a person is willing or able to give to a relationship at any given time. When someone's bandwidth for you shrinks, it rarely announces itself with words. It shows up in delays, in shorter replies, in effort that used to feel automatic, suddenly feeling forced. You've probably felt this before without having the language for it. You just called it something feels off and moved on, hoping it was temporary. Sometimes it is temporary. People go through seasons, stress at work, family pressure, personal struggles they haven't shared yet. Not every distance is a goodbye in disguise. But there's a difference between someone who pulls away and comes back, explaining themselves, repairing the gap, and someone who pulls away and simply stays gone, leaving you to fill in the silence with your own anxious guesses. One of those patterns is human and forgivable. The other is a quiet form of abandonment, dressed up as just being busy. This week is likely to clarify which pattern you're dealing with, and here's where it gets even more interesting. Because the signs won't only come from the people pulling away, they'll come from you too. You may notice yourself reacting differently than you expected. A message from someone you thought you missed might arrive, and instead of excitement you feel nothing. Or worse, a flicker of dread. That reaction is information. Your emotional system has been quietly recalibrating in the background, even while your conscious mind kept insisting everything was fine. On the other hand, you might feel a completely different kind of clarity, a warmth, an ease, a sense of coming home, around someone you hadn't fully appreciated before. Maybe it's a coworker who always remembers to ask how you're really doing. Maybe it's a sibling you've drifted from, but who still shows up without hesitation the moment things get hard. Maybe it's someone entirely new, someone who has only recently entered your life, and yet somehow already feels more grounding than people you've known for years. Both of these experiences, the sudden distance and the sudden closeness, are part of the same unfolding process. Your life isn't just losing something this week, it's recalibrating, making room. And making room always requires clearing something out first. There's an old idea, repeated across cultures and centuries in different forms, that people enter our lives for one of three reasons: a reason, a season, or a lifetime. It's a simple idea, maybe even an oversimplified one, but simple ideas often survive because they capture something true. Some people are only ever meant to teach us a specific lesson, and once that lesson is learned, the relationship naturally fades, no matter how much either person wishes it wouldn't. Some people are meant to walk beside us through a particular chapter, a job, a heartbreak, a recovery, and their presence, however meaningful, isn't designed to last beyond that chapter. And some people are woven into the entire story, present through every season, changing alongside us instead of falling away. The hard part is that in the moment, it's almost impossible to tell which category someone belongs to. We want to believe the people we love are lifetime people. We invest as if they are. So, when a reason or a season relationship starts fading, it doesn't feel like a natural ending. It feels like a personal failure. Like something is wrong with us for not being enough to keep them. But maybe that's the wrong way to see it. Maybe some relationships aren't meant to be permanent, not because you weren't enough, but because their purpose was never permanence to begin with. Maybe the friend who taught you how to set boundaries was never meant to stay once you learned how to use them. Maybe the person who showed you what real communication feels like wasn't meant to be your final relationship. Just proof that the real thing exists, so you'd recognize it later when it truly counted. If that idea unsettles you a little, that's understandable. It's uncomfortable to think of love and friendship in terms of purpose and timing rather than permanence. But there's also something quietly freeing about it. It means an ending doesn't have to mean failure. It can simply mean completion. This coming week may bring you face to face with at least one relationship that has quietly completed its purpose, even if neither of you says it out loud. But that isn't the only thing unfolding, because alongside every ending, something else tends to be arriving. And this is where the story becomes less about loss and more about arrival. About the people stepping toward you right now, even if you haven't fully noticed them yet. Pay attention to who initiates contact without being prompted. Pay attention to who remembers the small details of your life. Not the big milestones everyone remembers, but the quiet things. The offhand comment you made weeks ago that somehow stuck with them. Pay attention to who stays calm and present when you're anxious, instead of needing you to manage their reaction on top of your own feelings. These are not dramatic, cinematic signs. They're subtle, almost boring in a way. But subtle consistency is one of the rarest and most valuable things a person can offer, and it's often the very thing we overlook because it doesn't come with fireworks. Somewhere in the next several days, someone in your life is likely to show you, through a small, almost forgettable act, exactly how much they're willing to show up for you. It might be a text that says, "I just wanted to check on you," for no particular reason. It might be someone offering help before you even ask. It might be a moment where you expect disappointment and instead receive patience. When it happens, don't brush past it. That small moment is trying to tell you something important about where your energy belongs. At the same time, Something is likely to test you in the opposite direction. A moment where someone reveals, without meaning to, exactly how much space you actually occupy in their life. Maybe it's a cancelled plan with no real explanation. Maybe it's discovering you were left out of something you assumed you'd be included in. Maybe it's simply realizing, in a quiet, unremarkable moment, that you've been initiating every single conversation for weeks, and they've never once reached first. These two experiences, the quiet proof of loyalty and the quiet proof of distance, often arrive close together, almost like the universe wants you to compare them directly. As if it's saying, here is what showing up actually looks like. Now look again at what you've been settling for. This is the part where many people get uncomfortable, because it forces a kind of self-honesty that's easy to avoid in the noise of daily life. It's easy to convince yourself a relationship is fine when you're distracted by work, by responsibilities, by the sheer momentum of everyday routine. But this week has a way of slowing that momentum down, even briefly, creating small pockets of stillness where the truth has room to surface. A quiet evening, an unexpected pause in your schedule, a moment alone with your thoughts that you didn't plan for. In that stillness, things you've been avoiding tend to rise to the surface. If you feel that happening to you this week, resist the urge to distract yourself out of it. Let the thought finish. Let the feeling complete itself. Because these uncomfortable moments of clarity are usually not random disruptions. They're invitations. Invitations to finally acknowledge what part of you has known for a while. Now here's where the story deepens even further, because clarity about others is only half of what's unfolding. The other half is clarity about yourself. It's tempting to frame this entirely as a story about other people, who's leaving, who's staying, who's showing their true colors. But the deeper pattern researchers and spiritual thinkers alike keep pointing to is this. The relationships around us often mirror the relationship we have with ourselves. If you've been over-explaining your needs to people who don't listen, it might be because some part of you doesn't yet believe your needs are valid on their own. If you've been chasing people who keep you uncertain, it might be because uncertainty feels oddly familiar, even comfortable, compared to the unfamiliar calm of being genuinely valued. This isn't meant to blame you for anything. It's meant to hand you a different kind of power. The power that comes from understanding your own patterns instead of only reacting to other people's. This week may show you not just who belongs in your life, but why. Certain people have belonged there for the wrong reasons for far too long. And that's a much bigger revelation than it first appears. Because once you understand the why, the choice to change becomes less about punishing anyone and more about simply choosing differently going forward. You don't have to end things dramatically. You don't have to deliver speeches or demand explanations. Sometimes the most powerful shift is the quiet kind. Simply directing your time, your attention, your emotional energy toward the people who have already proven, repeatedly and consistently, that they deserve it. As this week unfolds, watch closely for a specific kind of moment. A moment that feels almost like déjà vu, except it isn't about a place or an event. It's about a feeling of finally seeing something clearly that you've circled around for a long time without quite landing on it. Some people describe it as a weight lifting. Others describe it as a strange calm settling in, almost like relief mixed with grief, because clarity, even good clarity, often comes with a small sense of mourning for the version of the relationship you once hoped for. That's normal. That's human. You're allowed to grieve the idea of something even as you release the reality of it. But on the other side of that grief tends to be something quieter and steadier, a sense of alignment. A sense that your life is finally starting to reflect who you actually are, rather than who you've been trying to accommodate for someone else's comfort. There's one more layer to this unfolding story, and it might be the most important one. Because signs, in the end, are not really about predicting the future. They're about training your attention. The more closely you pay attention this week to the pauses, the effort, the consistency, the silence, the more capable you become of noticing these same patterns long after this particular week has passed. That's the real gift hidden inside all of this. Not a single dramatic revelation, but a sharpened sense of awareness that stays with you. So, as these next several days unfold, you may find yourself noticing things you've never noticed before. A friend's tone shifting slightly during a phone call, a partner's silence lasting a beat too long, a stranger's kindness landing at exactly the moment you needed it most, as if timed on purpose. Whether you choose to see these moments as coincidence, psychology, energy, or something harder to name, the effect is the same. You are being asked to pay attention, and attention, once sharpened, rarely dulls again. By the time this week closes, you likely won't have every answer. Some relationships will still feel unresolved. Some questions will still be open. That's not a failure of the process. That's simply how real clarity tends to work. It rarely arrives all at once, wrapped up neatly. It arrives in fragments, over time, revealing itself a little more with every quiet moment you're willing to sit with instead of rushing past. What you can expect, though, is this. By the end of these 7 days, you will likely know, at least a little more clearly than you did before, who has been showing up for the relationship, and who has only been showing up for the convenience of it. You will likely feel, even faintly, a difference between the people who drain you and the people who restore you. And once you feel that difference clearly, even once, it becomes very hard to unfeel it again. That's not magic. That's not fate written in the stars in some fixed, unchangeable way. It's something quieter and, in some ways, more powerful. The simple, human act of finally paying attention to what your life has been trying to tell you for a long time. So, here is what's asked of you, if you choose to accept it. Not belief, not certainty, just attention. Watch the small moments this week. Notice who reaches out first. Notice who remembers what you said. Notice who stays steady and who disappears the moment things get hard. You don't need to act on every observation immediately. You don't need to end anything today. Just notice. Let the pattern reveal itself. Trust that clarity, once it begins, has a way of finishing what it started. And when you find that moment, the quiet one, maybe late at night, maybe in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, where something suddenly makes sense that didn't make sense before, sit with it. Don't rush to explain it away. That moment is the entire point of everything that's been building. Not a dramatic revelation, just a quiet, honest knowing. Take a moment, if you're willing, to think about someone whose presence in your life has felt steady lately. Not perfect, just steady. And think, too, about someone whose presence has started to feel more like a question mark than an answer. You don't have to do anything with those thoughts right now. Just let them exist. Sometimes, simply naming what you already feel is the first quiet step toward everything else that follows. If something in this resonated with you, you might already know, somewhere beneath the surface, exactly who it was about. That's not a coincidence either, because in the end, the people who are meant to stay in your life rarely need proof, and the people who are meant to leave rarely give you closure. What you're left with instead is simply the truth, quiet, patient, and finally impossible to ignore. Let this week speak, and for once, listen all the way to the end.